Before we dive into today's episode, I have something truly special to share. Next September, I'll be leading an intimate women's retreat through the south of France and northern Italy, and you're invited. Picture this: mornings exploring the colorful markets of the French Riviera, afternoons sipping wine, and a hotel view with golden Mediterranean sunsets. Whether you love photography, food, or just want to reconnect with your playful creative self, this trip is designed for you. Spots are limited, so if all this sounds like your kind of adventure, please visit tourwithabsolutely.com and look for the tour France and Italy with Crystal. You can also send me a message or check out the show notes. Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. If you want more bonus material and to support the show, head on over to patreon.com/La Vie Creative. And also don't forget to check out Amazon, where you can pick up my new book, Paris, A Life Less Ordinary. In the book, I talk about my creative adventures in Paris, from starting my business to being homeless, hello, starving artist, to how I met all these wonderful creative people. Don't forget to check it out on Amazon. And also thank you so much once more for listening and for your support. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to Paris History Avec a Hemingway. I am back with Claudine. We're bringing you all the fun history of women that you may not know, or you may know. A lot of these women I did not know, so I love talking to Claudine every week about them, and I hope you enjoy it too. Today we are talking about Martha Gelhorn. Martha Gelhorn was an American. She was a war correspondent, one of the first, I think, as far as females go. I don't think there were any other women doing that job, which also sounds terrifying even today. Like, I wouldn't have wanted to do that job. So Claudine's going to teach us about Martha. I'm obsessed with this woman. She lived a fascinating life. There's also a great movie about her starring the beautiful blonde, what's her face?
Nicole Kidman.
That one, yes. Very well done. Love that movie. But I'll let Claudine take it from here.
Yes, Martha Gelhorn. She's definitely one of my favorites. We left off in the intro for a specific reason that will, because of her wishes, we'll say. But we'll definitely talk about it. She was also the third wife of Ernest Hemingway.
We're honoring her. She didn't want to be known as that.
Martha Gelhorn is just amazing. And if I had to rank the wives, it would definitely be Hadley, then Martha, and then the other two.
Yeah. I don't care about the other two. Martha Hadley was cool. I actually think Martha's my number one. I mean, she was a fascinating woman, so brave. She was a great writer. I mean, I'm obsessed with her. I have a girl crush.
She's just absolutely freaking amazing. But Martha Gelhorn was born in 1908 in St. Louis, as was most of the women that he was involved with. Yes. For some reason, 3 of the 4 all were born in St. Louis. But Martha was born into, her mother was Edna Fischel, and she was a suffragette. This is 1908. And her father, George Gelhorn, was a German-born gynecologist.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And they lived in St. Louis, and they were very liberal and very open-minded. And when Martha was a child and at school, she went to a convent school. And when George learned that the convent had pasted photos over the pictures of the female anatomy in their school books, to shield the female anatomy, which I'm just imagining, like here's this, drawing of, all your bits, I guess you could call them. But he was so mad that they did that, he pulled her out of school.
Well, smart man.
Yeah, because he just thought this is just ridiculous. And so she was enrolled in the Mary Institute, where her mother was also the president.
Well, that's nice, or maybe annoying at the same time.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Great to go to school with my mom.
Yeah, my mom's the president.
But in 1908, that's pretty awesome that her mom was the president.
Yeah, that's huge. A woman president. Wow.
Yes. And so Ty, we always love to have these she has a couple funny things that really that tie her back to other women. I shouldn't say old, but other women we've talked about. And one of them was that Hemingway's first wife, was at a dance recital and spotted this beautiful young girl with long blonde pigtails. And she wrote about this one time. And it was actually Martha Gelhorn.
Oh, so wow, that's wild.
Yeah. So, they all, it's a small world, I guess.
Yeah, it is a small world, and St. Louis is a village.
It is. And so at just 8 years old, her mother took her to the Democratic Party suffragette rally that was at the 1916 convention in St. Louis. And so at a very young age, she was getting out there and seeing, other sides of everything, other sides of, what was going on in politics and everywhere. So in 1926, she enrolled in Bryn Mawr, where her mother also attended and was also a president.
Oh, wow. Her mom's the president at all her schools.
Her mom just kept moving along. Which is also where Hadley went to school. But she attended Bryn Mawr, and she majored in French. And after 1 year, she left because she just didn't see the point. Like, why am I here at school? I want to, there's other things I want to do. So she actually started writing for the New Republic paper. And in 1930, she decided to get out of the U.S. and go to Paris.
Very good for her.
Yeah, so she arrived with very little money. She gets to Paris, and she's trying to find a place to live, and she doesn't have that much money, even though $50 back then, was a lot more than $50 now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you could find any place to stay in Paris that you'd want to stay in for $50 a night.
You can't even stay in a hostel for $50 a night.
So, but she was able to find a cheap room to stay in a brothel.
Perfect.
Yeah, she didn't work there. That's not where the story's turning.
I wonder if they still offer that, can you go live in the brothel for cheap?
I don't know. Maybe you can rent the rooms at Hotel Dieu, which is the hospital right next to Notre Dame.
Oh, yeah.
They have some rooms there that you could rent. So, it's kind of the same.
Yeah. Around dying people or around prostitutes.
Exactly. So, but it was it was during that time that, Sun Also Rises had been published, and she, the Sun Also Rises, Hemingway's, first big major book, it kind of did, it kind of inspired people to get up and move and to leave and to travel. And so she was inspired by that book, and thought, well, I'll just go to Paris. And, I kind of like to think of it, it was, maybe it was the 1920s Eat, Pray, Love.
I didn't know that. That's funny.
Yeah, because it had, here's these great scenes in Paris and in, Spain at the bullfights. And, I guess if you're living in St. Louis, that's the whole huge world away.
Ernest Hemingway was the first to Eat, Pray, Love. Yes.
Yeah. So while she was there, when she was in Paris, she found a job working for the United Press as a foreign correspondent. And she was also working for Vogue, but she was fired from the United Press because she brought up somebody that she had worked with that was basically sexually harassing her. And so they fired her.
Of course.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So while she was there in Paris, she met a philosopher named Bertrand de Jouvenel. And you might remember that name when we talked about Colette. And Colette's had married a man, de Jouvenel, and he had a son that was older. And when she was towards the end of that marriage, she ended up having a 5-year affair with her husband's son, Bertrand de Jouvenel.
Whoa.
Yeah. And they were lovers for like 5 years. So Martha met him. There's definitely very conflicting. I've seen where they think that they were actually married And then where they weren't married, I've read a bunch of stuff that she's actually written where she says they weren't married. But a lot of biographies and a lot of things will actually say that they were, but we'll go with Martha that they weren't married. I think.
All right. Yeah, we'll honor her wishes.
But isn't that crazy? When I came across that name, I was like, no way.
I mean, it kind of makes sense that he'd be attracted to both kind of the same wild, strong, powerful women.
Definitely strong. Like, this is my opinion. I don't care what you think. Yeah. But she stayed in Paris for 4 years. And in 1934, she came back to the United States, and she knew a man named Harry Hopkins, and he was a Secretary of Commerce, and he was a really close friend and advisor to President Roosevelt. And so she ended up coming, she got invited to the White House, and she would spend a lot of time there at the White House, and she became very close friends with Eleanor Roosevelt. They even invited her to live there for a little bit. So Martha actually lived in the White House for a little while.
That is so cool. She befriended the president and was living in the White House.
Yeah, she's not living there. She wouldn't want to live there now, but she
she came a long way from St. Louis.
She came a long way, but she would help Eleanor, and they were very close friends. And she would help Eleanor write speeches and write articles and stuff that she needed to do. And she was a very close advisor. Later on down the road, she had been at the Kennedy inauguration, and President Kennedy came up to her at one of the parties and said, I understand that you used to live at the White House. Where are all the secret paths to sneak out?
Of course he'd be asking that question.
Exactly. I mean, I think if anybody, I would think anybody that lived there would probably want a way to sneak out of there at some time.
Yeah, it's kind of a prison.
Yeah, but Roosevelt ended up hiring her to work for the FERA, which is the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, to help with reporting on the effects of the Great Depression. So she would actually travel around the country with photographer Dorothy Lang, and the two of them would just capture everything visually and written about the history of the Depression and how it was affecting people. And Dorothy Lang, some of her photographs are the most famous. They instantly will come to mind if you look them up. I'll put some on my website of our vision of what the Depression was, these just black and white, very sad, very raw images. And so between Martha and Dorothy, they kind of basically captured everything that had happened during that time.
I didn't know those two worked together. Everyone knows Dorothy. Oh my gosh, her photos are, that one with the mother and the two kids at the doorstep, that's the most famous Great Depression photos.
Yeah. And then didn't they just have wasn't it the last year or two, the Jeu de Paume, didn't they do an exhibition of her stuff?
Yeah, she was here. Yeah.
And it was I remember it was huge. You had to get tickets weeks in advance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, Dorothy Lang is huge. I feel even if you don't know anything about photography, everyone's seen Dorothy Lang's work.
Yeah. That picture of that woman is just such a beautiful but sad photo. But
it would make sense those two would work together.
Yeah. But Martha, being a little bit outspoken as she liked to be, she was later fired because she was in Idaho, and the office workers at the FERA workers had decided that they had this horrible boss, and they kept complaining about him, and nobody was doing anything about it. So she told them that they should break all the windows to draw some attention.
What?
Yeah, and Martha lost her job.
Probably wasn't the best advice.
It probably wasn't the best advice, no. But if you see that movie, you could actually find, and I'll put some of them also on my website. You could actually, I found a couple of videos for her talking, and if you've seen that movie. I think it's Hemingway and Gelhorn. I think it's what it's called.
Yeah,
Clive. What's his name? Clive.
Oh.
Yeah. And Nicole Kidman, and she has a way of talking that's so much like Martha. So it's I just imagine her, with her, this is what you're going to do. This, Yeah,
she did a really good job portraying her.
Master, the impressionist. But in 1936, sadly, her father passed away, and her mother and her brothers decided they were going to go down to Key West for Christmas. So they traveled down to Key West, and at the time, she was younger than Ernest Hemingway, and we talked about the impression that Sun Also Rises left on her. but she was a big fan of his. And so they went down to Key West, and they went into this bar called Sloppy Joe's Bar. And there he was there. Hemingway was there, staying at the bar, drinking all of his rum drinks. And there's a lot of different accounts, and a lot of them have definitely been, poetically written of how, she walked in wearing this black tight dress and her blonde hair, and she was pretty tall and drew all the attention from everyone. And in the movie, they definitely capture that scene too. I think it was probably, I don't think it was quite as Hollywood as that, but
yeah. Oh, I love that movie. Oh my gosh. But I can't imagine meeting your idol. Like that would be like me walking to a bar and meeting Elizabeth Gilbert, because like Eat, Pray, Love, like changed my life, as basic as that sounds. But that's so cool. I love that she, like, how crazy is it that they just happen to be there at the same time?
Yeah, I know that. It's just, yeah. I mean, that for me, it'd be if I met Neil Diamond.
Yeah, Neil Diamond.
I wouldn't even be able to talk. I love him so much.
Yeah, it's hilarious. You just marry him.
He's been married quite a few times, but he's quite a bit older than me too.
So is Ernest.
That's true. But at first, he thought that she was there. One of her brothers was there. Was her husband. And so at first he kind of was just, kind of standoffish, and she began talking to him, and they actually began as friends. And he, instantly was just like, well, you got to come over for dinner. You got to, come meet Pauline and come to the house. And his house always had like a revolving amount of people coming in and out. And, he was a writer, and we all know about, that's when the drinking, everybody always thinks of Hemingway and his drinking, but it wasn't like the second he got to Paris, he was the drinker that we all know. That was more like these years is when he, could put down, 15 rum drinks and still keep going on. But she came over to the house, and she spent a lot of time with them, with Pauline and the kids and the family. And then after a few weeks, she decided she was going to go to Spain because the Spanish Civil War had started. And so she wrote for Collier's Weekly. And so she was leaving for Spain. And she was one of the very first female war correspondents. There was another gal before her, but she was one of the very first ones.
I'm surprised he even let her, honestly.
Yeah, well, she didn't. It wasn't, very easy. She had to get to places. She had to travel on the backs of trucks with livestock. She had to do, basically do anything and everything she could to get to the front line, and it wasn't easy. Like she had to get special. You had to be licensed and all of this stuff, and get travel papers to be able to travel to all these places. A lot of times, it was really difficult for her to get those things, but for the men, it was so easy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so they didn't really help her as a woman.
No, definitely didn't help her. Also it was incredibly dangerous. Like, I'm just like, I don't even nowadays, I'm like, that does not sound like a good time.
Oh yeah. I mean, so many of the war photographers die, the journalists die. Like, I wouldn't want that job.
No way. No. But so she goes to Spain, and then also so does Mr. Hemingway comes to Spain. And during that time, that's when things between them change from just being a friend and a fellow writer to being much more than that. And so the two of them traveled together, but she was always still very focused on what she was doing. She still wasn't going to be the little lady sitting back at the hotel. She was the one that was like, wanted to get out there, wanted to get like basically right to the action. So after Spain, she went to Germany in 1938, and she was able to witness basically the rise of Hitler and see what everything that was going on there. And
she lived so many lives.
I know. And this is only like 1938. So at the same time that she traveled all over, she was in Czechoslovakia, Singapore, Russia, Finland, Hong Kong, Burma, everywhere where if there was a story, that's where she went.
Wow.
And she had a different way of writing, reporters are supposed to be just kind of like, in the middle, and, it's not about their personal feelings, and it's just about reporting, the facts and things like that. But she had this different way where she basically had this like a deep amount of empathy, and she was painted an honest picture of what was going on. So like she would actually paint, she was there later on, when one of the concentration camps was basically, everybody was released, and she was there to see that, and she was able to, it definitely changed her life in many ways, seeing that firsthand, which I think would be horrific.
Mm.
But she was basically wrote it in a way that made it relatable, and for people like to really even understand it even more.
Yeah, which is needed in situations like that.
Yeah. I mean, and, it was basically, she wrote what she saw. She didn't really, she's just like, this is how it is. And, it's definitely what, with the Great Depression and all of that stuff, that's why it kind of gave that, I mean, you think of all these things, and regardless who's reporting it, they were all horrible things.
Mm-hmm.
But the way she wrote about it just made it a little bit even more real.
Yeah. She was a really great writer.
Yeah. And she was definitely wanted to, any injustice, she was definitely like, nope, everybody's going to know about this. This isn't okay.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1939, in May, she and Ernest, when he was still married, went down to Havana, Cuba, and she found a place to rent, and it was the Finca Vigia, and that's where he basically later, that everybody knows of his years in Cuba and his home there, but it was Martha that found it, and they lived there together for a while. They would be there, and they would write together, and they each had their own space, and they would be writing, but she was rarely there. She was always off chasing a story, which didn't always make him very happy. But she was a woman that had a career, and she wasn't there just to be the housewife at home. So they were actually married a few months after his divorce with Pauline went through. They got married on November 21st, 1940 in Wyoming. And he where he had spent a lot of time, they had been there for a while, and he was writing For Whom the Bell Tolls. And in 1939 and 1940, and then it was published just before they went on their honeymoon.
Wow.
And in 1941, Martha went to China on an assignment, and she really wanted to go on this assignment. He wasn't too excited about it. He was like, why can't you just stay home? Why do you need to go? And she wanted to go there and write about what was happening there. And so he went with her, which wasn't probably the greatest idea. I think it's interesting because I've always thought that the things that attract you, that are attractive to another person, are also the same things that end up later down the line being what pushes you apart.
Yeah.
He really liked the fact that she was, a writer and a correspondent, and she had this career. She was the only one really that had a definite career. Of all the wives, and at first he really liked that. Well, but then he didn't like that because, he wasn't doting on him all the time and, telling him what he wanted to hear. And she was just like, no, this is my life, and this is my career, and this is what I'm going to go do.
Yeah, I mean, she definitely was an independent woman, it's really shocking that they worked at all together, because he was such a I'm going to do what I want man. So for the two of them to be together was kind of insane to begin with.
Yeah, it wasn't really a good fit. But Martha during this time, she was growing more critical of the U.S. as it was getting closer to World War II. Fascism and everything that was going on in the world. She was really having a hard time with it, and critical to the U.S. And so she decided she wanted to be in Europe, and she wanted to get out of there. So it was getting close to, it was in World War II at this point, and she wanted to get over to Europe. And so she actually hid in the bathroom of a ship.
What?
Going from New York to France, which, I mean, that takes a week back then?
She was hanging out in a bathroom for a week?
Yeah, she hid in a bathroom. Get to there, and it was towards the end of the war. And when she arrived, she had to she dressed up as a paramedic because she was back in France, and it was getting really close to D-Day as we know it today. And so she dressed up as a paramedic and snuck in to the beaches of Normandy. She was the only female on the entire stretch of the beaches of Normandy on D-Day.
What? That's insane, and also terrifying. That's the last place I would have wanted to be. I can't even imagine what she saw.
Yeah. I mean, there's no way. I just can't even think about it. But she, at the same time, they were married, but it wasn't very good at this point. Hemingway was also, he was on a boat. He had he'd come from England, and he was taking a boat, and he wanted to get over there as well. But the boat never reached the shore. So he actually never was on the beach of Normandy. There have been other accounts where he would later say that he was, but he had never made it. And she did, which was not a good thing for him.
He was probably very unhappy about that.
Yeah, he was not happy. But she was there. She would, talk to soldiers and truck drivers and the people that lived there and the paramedics to get, their eyewitness account of everything that was happening. And, and writing all of it in her own, very unique, special way.
That's so wild. And also, I think she would need a lot of therapy after seeing the Holocaust and D-Day beaches.
Oh, I know. I can't even imagine. But, before that, she was actually trying to get him to Europe because she had already gone to Europe and he was still back in the States. She had talked to, and she had known the writer, Roald Dahl, who was, when I was a kid, one of my favorites because he wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and all of those amazing books. But he was actually a officer in the British Royal Air Force. And so she had told him, she got him to get a seat for Hemingway to be able to fly over there to Europe. And so but right before he was going to come, he had talked to Collier's, which is the same publication that she was writing for. And they ended up hiring him as a correspondent and basically at a level above her and paying him more money.
That's so crappy.
Yeah, it's not good. So with her, that was kind of the last straw. She was kind of at that point was just like, this, no way. She, when she went back to England because she had, she was going to go back to England after all of this. And she was asked by a reporter when she got there, what was going on with Hemingway and the accident and all this. And she was like, what are you talking about? What accident? He had been in an accident and they had swerved and his driver swerved and they hit a pole, I think it was. And basically, he hit his head. There's many times that he had like concussions, which I think later definitely led to a lot of the issues that he had towards the end of his life that made him actually kill himself.
Yeah.
But he was at the St. George Hospital and she went to go see him. They were still married. And she walked in to see him and his head was all bandaged, his head was cut up and he had a bandage on. He had a concussion, but he was surrounded by all of his friends and there was empty booze bottles like on the bed in the hospital.
So he was drinking even then.
Yeah. And so she was just completely livid and she was just like, this is crazy. And she wanted to be out of it. She'd also heard that he had already taken up with another woman named Mary Welsh, who would end up becoming his fourth wife. My least favorite.
So he already had moved on from her.
Oh yeah. So he, he's there in England. She leaves. She goes to Paris. He also goes to Paris. He is staying at the Ritz Hotel. He's staying there with Mary. He called Martha and asked if, they could go to dinner to talk about things. And so Martha said, okay. She gets there to have dinner and that there's already like, he's in this restaurant with like 5 of his friends. And so she was livid because she thought she was going to have this, chance to talk to him and they were going to talk about things. And, he gets there and he's clearly has no intention of having this conversation with her because all of his friends are there.
It's like dating a child.
Yeah. And so she, had heard, the word about Mary had spread everywhere. So she actually said that she was going to give him a divorce. She didn't want to be married anymore. She wanted to get a divorce. So afterwards, she told him this and he was just livid because none of the women in his life ever left him.
He was the first. She was the first to leave him.
Agnes, who was the nurse in Italy, and when he was injured in World War I, who he fell in love with, and he thought they were going to get married, and then he came back to the States, and she sent him a letter saying that they weren't she found somebody else who's not going to get married.
Yeah.
So after that, I've always thought that it's kind of like he'd find ways to get out of his marriage or leave them. So he didn't ever have to go through that, because it like really, really hurt him and upset him when Agnes did that. He was really in love with her. So
Yeah.
when Martha goes and does and says, forget it, I don't want to be with you anymore, I want a divorce, it did not sit well with him, because they didn't leave him. People didn't leave him. He made the choice every single time.
Mm-hmm.
So she wrote him on November 3rd, she wrote him a letter and, told him, we're going to, get a divorce. I want a divorce. I don't want to do this anymore. And he was, obviously pretty ticked off. But on December 21st, 1945, they were actually it was granted.
Finally. Yes. I mean, I feel like they were just not a good match at all.
No, definitely not a good. They're way too strong of personalities.
They were in competition pretty much. It was just like one big competition.
Yeah. And so she stayed in Europe. She, didn't want to be back in the US. She stayed in Europe, and in Italy in 1949, she went and adopted a son. And it's a little cute Italian boy and she named him George Alexander Gelhorn. And at first she was incredibly devoted to him. And she took him to live, in Mexico, anywhere but the US. Eventually, once he got a little bit older, a few years older, she actually just left him in New Jersey with some family.
So she abandoned her kid.
Kind of, sort of. So
in New Jersey
with family. So, and it actually ended up that, they didn't really ever have a very, sadly, they did not have a very good relationship at all. Like, they weren't very close. She doesn't really seem, I mean, I like we said, I absolutely adore her. You absolutely adore her. She doesn't really seem like the motherly type.
Yeah. I say like having a child was probably not the best idea.
Probably wasn't the best thing. So, but in 1954, I'm sorry, she actually married T.S. Matthews, who was an editor at Time magazine. And they divorced 9 years later. And she was quoted saying that marriage bored her.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So, she was, being a war correspondent, but she kept traveling everywhere. But she also wrote a lot of fiction as well. She wrote 5 different novels. She wrote 14 novellas, 2 collections of short stories. And some of them are really funny. In 1979, she wrote a book about travels with myself and another. And she was I'll link to some of the pieces of the book. They're pretty funny, but she never mentions Hemingway by name. She just only called him her unwilling companion.
I love that. That's so funny.
Yeah. But in 1970, she bought a flat in London that she would have until the end of her life. And shortly around that time, her mother died. And she and her mother were incredibly, incredibly close. I mean, her mom was like so ahead of the times, being a president multiple times and a suffragette and all of this stuff. And when I was doing a lot of research about her, it was at the time when it was the 100th anniversary of the suffragette movement in the United States. And it was quite, full circle. It was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But she ended up buying, she had this flat in London that she bought that was in Sloane Square. And she also had a small cottage that she bought in Wales.
That's so nice. So she just lived the British country life up until the end of her life.
She did. And so, but she, she still kept traveling. She went to Vietnam, Nicaragua. She went down to the Arab-Israeli conflict. She was 81 years old when she was doing some of that.
What? I mean, it's just amazing to me. She never got hurt. She never got like raped or attacked, because she was a beautiful woman too. Yeah. It's not like she like blended into these places.
Oh no, she definitely stuck out. But about that time when she was 81, her health started to suffer. She had this very deep, raspy voice, and she never really cared about she never cared about cooking or fashion or any of those kinds of things. Like she was definitely her own person. Mm-hmm. And she started to get sick, and when during that time she went into Selfridges, which is a huge huge department store in England. And she was there and she decided she wanted to smoke. So she just lit up a cigarette in the middle of the store. They were not happy about that. They kicked her out and banned her for ever returning, which she probably could have cared less. Like she probably was like, there's nothing I want here anyway. Who cares? But she, the biggest thing and why we kind of started off by not mentioning in the intro about her, but her biggest thing was that she never wanted to just be a footnote in the life of Hemingway.
She definitely wasn't. She lived such a wild life.
Yeah. And you think about that basically of the other three wives, they all are, they're never, they're basically known to us. They all obviously each had their own accomplishments and they were their own women, but all of them were just basically Hemingway's wives.
Yeah. Yeah. No, she was definitely her own person and very much like her own crazy wild life. And in some ways, I would say even wilder than Hemingway. I mean, Hemingway's done crazy stuff, but she was really like all over the world.
She was. And, after they got divorced, she wouldn't allow anybody around her to ever mention his name. But friends of hers said that, that when they'd see her and they'd be sitting around drinking, it always at some point, somebody would bring it up. And, at that point, she kind of didn't really care. But
he was like Voldemort.
Yeah,
the name that she'll not be spelled.
I know. She's just like, I'm drunk now. Who cares?
Been there.
Yeah. But on February 15th, 1998, she had been suffering from liver and ovarian cancer. She had lost her eyesight over time. And so on February 15th, 1998, she actually killed herself by swallowing a cyanide pill.
Wow.
It's not just apparently in James Bond movies.
Oh my gosh. Also, Martha is James Bond.
I know. But she was 89 years old.
She killed herself.
She was in a lot of pain. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think if I'd lost my eyes, if you were a writer and you lost your eyesight, like, oh
God, that's my biggest fear as a photographer.
No, totally.
And like, wow. And also like she basically euthanized herself because she was in pain and she was tired. And I mean, it would be nice to kind of do that if you are in that much pain and you're that old, But
it's so fitting. Of course she would.
Yeah. And I guess, was Hemingway already dead?
Yeah. He died at 51. So
did she ever comment on that? I guess not.
I don't know. I mean, she had that pretty strict, don't talk, I don't want to ever talk about him again.
She lived a long life and like all the crazy war stuff she covered and didn't get shot, like insane.
Yeah, she was 89 years old.
That is so cool. I mean, just proof, ladies, don't be afraid to travel alone because she was like going to like war zones and she was okay.
I know. I just think she's just like one of the coolest, most fascinating, awesome women. I mean, just the things that she did and being on the beaches of Normandy on D-Day is just...
I mean, she's obviously the most badass woman we've talked about.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that definitely, hopefully people listen to this and know now that she is hardly a footnote in his story.
I love that ending. And tune in next week, guys, to learn about another fascinating woman in French history.
Thank you for listening to Paris History Avec a Hemingway. If you want to find out some more, you could always find me on my Instagram page, Claudine Bleu Blanc Rouge, and that's BLEU, as in the French way to spell it. And each day I post a daily history lesson about a person or a place or something in Paris, or it's lots of fun facts. And then also at ClaudineHemingway.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter there.